Hi there, it's real estate coach Josh Fegan and welcome to this week's coaching tip. Now you've got a real choice as a real estate agent. You can either focus on the competitors or you can focus on the customers. Now I know that only one of them actually pays the invoices, and that's the customers. So if you really want to win a marketplace, don't worry about what your competitors are doing, actually focus on the customer. Now, a great example of this is real estate agents and pre-listing kits. And I think that at one of the major conferences back in about 1999, someone came out with this idea that we should all have a pre-listing kit. That was some sort of document or even a video that we might actually send to a customer before we turn up to the listing presentation. And over the course of the last 20 years or so, real estate agents around the world have actually gone to try to get this great pre-listing kit sorted. And everyone wants to know, what should I send and what do other people send and can I copy that and how do I make that look exactly like what the other people are currently doing? Now the problem with that is that when it actually gets to the consumer, does the consumer actually really value that pre-listing kit? Does it actually change anything when it comes to the listing presentation itself? Or are we in a position that we're just copying what everyone else has done, and what actually ends up happening is the industry gets less smart rather than smarter in its approach to actually dealing with the customer? Now there's a phenomenal book called The Power of Moments written by Dan and Heath Chip. And in that, what they do is they speak about the specific things that we need to do in order to be able to engineer the moments. Now here's a great example. Let's say, for example, that you talk to a young child who's going to be going to Disneyland. The peak in that child's experience in going to Disneyland is about 2 weeks out because they're super excited about going. They then get to Disneyland and then they've got to line up, and that's like kind of a low point. But once they get inside of Disneyland, they then see Mickey Mouse. That's now a high point. Then they've got to go and walk to get to the ride, and that's a low point. When they get to the ride, it actually says it's 55 minutes to now line up before they can get on the ride, which is also a low point. But then they speed through that line in 20 minutes, which is now a high point. They get on the ride, that's also a high point. Off the back of that, they come off the ride, they've got to now try and find something to eat, that's a low point. They eat the food, also a low point. They then head off to go to the next ride, but then they get to go and see the whole Disneyland parade. That's a high point. After the Disneyland parade, they got a low point because they're kind of exhausted as the day's been progressing. So then they have one of those churros donuts that then becomes a high point. Then they've got a low point kind of moping around, another high point when it comes to the actual fireworks, a low point walking out, and a high point buying their Mickey or Minnie Mouse ears to then go and put on their head. When they go to leave the park, you then ask a child, how was Disneyland today? And they just say, I'm exhausted. And you don't really get much out of them. You go 3 weeks down the track and you go, hey, what was it like going to Disneyland? And they say, well, you know what happened? We saw Mickey Mouse, we got to go on a ride, we got the churros donuts, we saw the whole parade, and I even got Mickey Mouse ears. And so what actually happens is that the further that you move away from the transaction, the more that the customers remember the high points. So this is why feedback surveys, if sent immediately, actually tend to get more of the low points captured than the high points about what the successful things were that actually happened in that event. Now, everything that happens at Disneyland is actually mapped specifically to those high and low points. How do we marry a high point closely to where the low point actually exists? Now, this is a great question because how do we do that from a real estate perspective? Think about the buyer who turns up to an open for inspection. What actually happens post? What happens when someone goes to make an offer, pays a deposit, right the way through to getting press inspections, building inspections, leading up to the actual exchange, making everything happen when we get to settlement day, and then moving in and actually successfully living in the property for a year. You see, these are all of the important things that a great real estate agent says, you know what, rather than worrying about the competitors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to worry about the customer. I'm going to map out specifically what the high points and low points are, and then decide exactly what it is that we need to do in order to be able to ensure that we deliver a customer experience that is actually what the customer desires and actually sets an expectation when they say, you know what, that's why I use you as my real estate agent. Well, I really hope that you've enjoyed this week's coaching tip, and we can't wait to see you next week.